Welcome to Take Up Space, coming into full expression with courage and beauty. Our world needs conscious, fully engaged women like you, who are ready to show up authentically with all your precious and unique gifts. The antidote to toxic structures that seek to silence our voices is to be audaciously unapologetic in expressing your full radiance and beauty. And this summit offers a doorway of creative transformation to support you in stepping into your power. Be inspired by the gathering of courageous women leaders who are here to show you the way. Gain new perspectives and practical takeaways so that you can embrace the full spectrum expression of the divine feminine in a way that is uniquely aligned to you. I'm your host for this event, Irene Chong, and today I'm especially excited because I'll be the one being interviewed. I'd like to hand the space over now to my dear sister and priestess friend, Julia Weigert from Soul Wisdom. So Julia, please take it away.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you so much for having me. It is such a pleasure and an honor to interview you as the host of this beautiful summit that you created. And to everybody out there listening and watching, let me introduce Irene to you. Irene is the founder of Alignment Journeys, a business that was born out of a desire to fill the gaps in knowledge that aren't readily available in conventional education systems. Through the Aligned Woman's Way, an art of creating space that fosters and facilitates feminine flow, Irene teaches women how to tap into and access their innate intuition and wisdom, the inner wellspring from which beauty and ease naturally flow. Irene is on a mission to empower heart-centered women to shine in their authentic radiance and beauty. As coach, creative, and healer, she works with her clients to craft and curate every aspect of their lives so they get to live the masterpiece that they dream of. I am so excited to be interviewing you, Irene. Thank you for creating this beautiful, beautiful summit. And your topic of today is Embrace the Awe in You, Living Life the Aligned Woman's Way. What a topic. Wow. So my first question to you is actually also the question that you are asking every of your speakers as the first question. What was your biggest challenge around expressing your truth, and what enabled you to courageously show up in your full authenticity?
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, that's a great question. And now, at the time of this interview, I have spoken to every single speaker who's going to be on this summit. So I've also heard a variety, a spectrum of responses. So my personal take is this. Even figuring out my truth was a challenge. I think it had to do with how sensitive I was and how I was picking up on a lot of energies around me. So coming back to myself and centering and asking my heart, what is it that I want? Who am I? What is it that I want to express and bring out? That in itself was already a challenge. And one of the things I struggled with was also articulating, putting that into words. I could feel, I could sense, and there was this knowing in my heart, but I wasn't able to use language to express it. But I instinctively and I innately knew what I was drawn to. So for instance, the beautiful painting by Van Gogh behind me, as a child, I was struck just in wonder at the beauty and the genius of this painter. I could also sense it when I would taste something delicious, something that was beautifully and artistically created by a chef. Or I could feel it in every fiber of my being when I read a beautiful poem or a good book. And that's what led me to major in literature in university. And I had this idea that I would pursue this subject for the rest of my life as an academic, as a school teacher, etc. But over the years, over the decades of inner work that I've been doing, I was able to sit in the stillness and listen to that quiet voice in my heart. And now I'm able to articulate and distill the essence of my truth, my desire and my dream, which is to create beauty and inspire awe in the world. I remember the moment when that came through, when I was able to express that and put that into words finally. I just broke into tears. There was a moment of revelation and also relief that, yes, that is my truth. And it's a knowingness that is unshakable. So that at its core, figuring out my truth took decades to finally be able to articulate it. And then came the next part. How do I express it? How do I bring all of myself into the world? And that was a huge challenge. And I believe that that's also a core struggle that so many women are facing today. So now that I knew that I wanted to create beauty, and the priestess path is the beauty way, I knew I wanted to do that. I wanted to be able to inspire awe and bring that sense of wonder into the world. But how do I translate that into real world practical action? At the same time, I had also found that I'd been living my life partially hiding in the shadows. There were parts of myself that I didn't like or I didn't accept because of conditioning, programming, being told that parts of me were not good enough. That's also a core wounding that a lot of people face. And so what would happen would be that I would step out and show up partially, but not fully. And it always struck me that there was something not quite authentic about it. I'm comfortable with being in certain roles, but there were parts of myself that I was not able to accept and embrace. So then came the journey of doing a lot of shadow work. And a lot of the time that can be scary because these are the parts that we have disowned, we have seen as bad. So a lot of judgment, a lot of fear. And so this is where courage comes into the equation, where I've come to realize that so long as I had sincerity and the willingness to open up and to confront, the support from the universe would come. This came in the form of mentors, the right course would drop in at the right time. I would meet the right person, a conversation would strike up. So there were all these synchronicities that landed that enabled me to confront my shadows and to step forth from a place of radical self-acceptance and self-love. So then, as I went deeper into my devotional work, it became clear that the mission that I was drawn to was to be in devotional service to the sacred feminine, to be able to support other women in that same process and that same journey as well. And then I realized that my entire life basically was the path that I had to take in order to get to where I am today, to be clear, to have that clarity, to be able to articulate, to express it. And I'm still on the journey. I believe that it's a journey that never ends. And that's what's exciting about it. Because as human beings, or rather as spiritual beings living a human life, we get to expand, continually grow, and evolve. So when I think about, when you read out my bio, I think one of the lines that I loved writing because it spoke to my heart was that sentence around supporting women to craft and curate every aspect of their life so that they get to live the masterpiece of their dreams. And this year, when I was preparing to launch my summit, I was thinking, okay, so what are some of the themes that were desiring to be brought forth? So I've shared some of my personal journey, but also in the collective field with the women that I meet. It's just so clear that so many women are awakening to their gifts. They want to step more fully into them, but they're not quite sure how. So I wanted to create an offering that would provide the information, the knowledge, the education to inspire them and show them that there is a path, there is a journey that they can take. And I was especially inspired. For some reason, I kept coming back again and again to this painting. And so I decided to use it as my backdrop, as the overarching theme, because the idea of becoming an artist of your life, to create the magnificent masterpiece that you desire, I think that is sorely needed. In fact, I would say it's necessary. because the world is not going to change. Present circumstances, which everywhere you look, we know that we're living in a crisis. Things need to change. But that's not going to happen from a top-down way. It has to happen from the ground up. When women awaken to their power, when they realize that they have what it takes inside of them to create the reality that they wish to see and experience. And when it comes to the personal, whatever changes that they're able to manifest in their life, that will have a ripple, a trickle effect onto the collective as well. So I'm finding that, the time of dominant leadership that is top down, very hierarchical, that is no longer functioning. We see it every day all around us. But the new paradigm, the new earth that so many spiritually awakened people are seeing is the idea that as a collective, in the Aquarian age that we're living in, it's by every single individual playing his and her part, living her role. So that's what inspired me to, number one, I want to be a part of this amazing movement. And number two, I want to be able to contribute to it as well in the best way I can, which is to create beauty in the form of the offerings that I put out that will hopefully inspire awe and reverence. And when I say awe and reverence, I want every woman to be inspired from the summit, to go away feeling and knowing in every cell of her being that she is amazing. When she looks at herself in the mirror, I want her to be in awe of the creation that she is, and to be able to dream big and say to herself, I have absolutely what it takes to live my dreams, to manifest the desire, the dream that I hold inside. So yeah, I think I've kind of covered several threads here.
Wow. I've had several truth bumps all over my body when you spoke. Thank you so much for expressing your own, challenges, because I also feel that it is so needed right now that we do show up vulnerably and also are voicing the way that we can show up now. As you said, it's a process, right, to get there, and that there is hardship, and then there is also a revenue that we get after. So thank you so much for speaking into that. And, when you touched on these two themes about the courage and the beauty, what kept on coming for me was this tarot card with the woman and the lion. I think it's the strength, if I recall correctly. And so that is very prominent because it's two themes that I feel are maybe not so, obvious to go together. And the way that you put it, it's just so beautiful how this is actually two very, very important traits of expressing the divine feminine within us in these crucial times of change. So thank you for speaking into that. And now, of course, we want to go into the awe, which I love that you're doing this play on words here. How did you come up with the concept and the methodology of the awe?
Thank you for your reflection, Julia. I just really love being in a feminine space and having that support and nourishment. So I just want to express that because I feel, again, that is something that is so sorely missing in our world today. Earlier on, I talk about the kind of conditioning and programming that has kept so many people in a state of lack, believing that they're not enough, and also thereby believing that they cannot have what they desire because they're not deserving, they're not worthy, etc. And that was very much a huge part of my life. I realize now when I look back that for more than 30 years of my life, I was constantly trying to improve myself. And that came from a place of wanting to fix, wanting to become a better person. But the motivation for that stemmed from a lack of belief that I am inherently pure and good. And I think due to the cultural upbringing and the societal conditioning that I was in, that was perpetuated time and time again. This idea that I need to be fixed. And the way or the solution was to look externally for authority figures or for experts that had it all and knew everything. So imagine I spent countless decades, lots of time, plenty of money, investing in trainings, programs, etc. I do want to acknowledge that I enjoyed the journey because I love learning. But at the same time, I felt that I was constantly banging up against a wall. Just when I'd been told that this is the one thing you need, or this is the one program that will change your life, I would leave feeling uplifted and inspired. Some of these were very motivational trainings, but I always felt that there was something missing. So I began my journey ever since I was a teenager, looking for a way out of family dysfunction and trauma. When I was in university and I left my family of origin, I went deeper into a lot of esoteric teachings that were not allowed in my family home. Delved deeper into that. And then when I reached my mid-20s and into my early 30s, this was where I had to become a full adult. And as a woman navigating very human challenges in both my career and my relationships, I soon discovered that all the personal development work that I had been doing was not quite hitting home. And I realized that I was lacking. What I'd been looking for was an integral, all-encompassing system that would support me to balance both my personal and my spiritual life. I'm sure you've heard of the cliche, the time is over for the sage to meditate and spend his or her life up in the mountains, being a hermit. This is a time and age when we have to actively be in this world, but not of it. So on my journey, in my search, I would come across female wisdom teachers who were teaching or coming from a place where they were rejecting their femininity. So they were operating in an over-masculinized way. And that didn't appeal to me because I knew that there was a different approach, there was a different way. But then I would also come across female teachers who were completely embodying their feminine, but they were so feminine that they lacked a structure. There wasn't a steady container that made their teachings accessible. I would flow with them, but sometimes it felt like I was caught up in their current, but I wasn't able to find my own center. So throughout my journey, I became increasingly frustrated, and it wasn't until I decided that it's time to take the lead. Because my background is as a school teacher, one of the areas that I'm especially interested in is pedagogy, how learning takes place, how to best facilitate that. I also did a lot of content and lesson planning. So I was therefore inspired on a personal trajectory to do it for myself. And once I set the intention, it was almost as the universe opened up and said, yes, this is what you're here to do. This is what your path is. We're going to show you. And that was how it really started. What inspired me to then put this curriculum out is the imbalance that I'm seeing. First, in the students that I was teaching, who were constantly overwhelmed. And I felt that the conventional education system was not educating them, especially the female students that I was teaching, that it was a different way of approaching life. So I was seeing the benefits of applying what I had systematically come up with in my life, but I recognized that I wasn't able to support my students in that. And then at the same time, when I look at the world around me, I cannot help but witness a growing discordance and a growing imbalance that is a result of living in a toxic patriarchal society where, we're often taught, and this is what advertising does. It tells us every day that we get to experience true fulfillment in all these ways if we buy a product, if we follow a certain path. But the aligned woman's way is about, first of all, coming into inner alignment, aligning every single area of your life, from your personal to your professional, from your health, career to your relationships, spiritual development, etc. It has to come from that inner place of true alignment first, before you can step out into the world and create the reality that you desire. So the aligned woman's way, in a nutshell, is about aligning every single sphere of your life, personal and professional, so that you create a resonance and alignment inside of you that magnetizes and draws to you your desired reality.
That leaves me in awe. I loved how you said, and I want to reiterate it because I feel that it's very important, be in the world, not of it. And it's a theme that also when I tune in, I feel it's so important of this time. So that kind of like leads us into, specific examples. Can you share a little bit how living the aligned woman's way expresses, and how is that maybe different from the masculine way of operating?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, let's go into the masculine. So the masculine, a lot of it is about, I think this is something that everyone is familiar with. When the going gets tough, we're told, just push on, be tough, take action. There's always this idea that you've got to be doing something, right? That productivity and efficiency is prized. Goal setting is very linear. It's about getting from A to B. The masculine is very focused. It's straightforward. It's direct. You don't want to have any stops along the way. So at this point, I also just want to emphasize that this is not a bad thing inherently. We do need the masculine. But if this is the only way that you are operating, and as I said, we are living in a society that prioritizes the masculine to the extent that it is toxic. It is not healthy. And it is not healthy because it is imbalanced. So it actually goes against the grain of being a woman. Just biologically, we inhabit female bodies that are cyclical in nature. And it takes a lot of energy, to think about it, to push yourself, to push upstream instead of flowing with the currents. So what I find is that virtually every woman I meet has experienced and is still experiencing burnout, fatigue, chronic fatigue. And the antidote is to bring the sacred feminine back online again. So I want to emphasize and underline that it's not about rejecting, discarding the masculine. It is about bringing the sacred feminine back online. Now, the feminine, unlike the masculine, is not linear and straightforward. It can feel like a meander sometimes. And that's one of the reasons why I named my company Alignment Journeys. Because when you go on a journey, it's never as straightforward as it looks. Sometimes you might want to diverge, or there may be pit stops along the way. It's not about solely getting to the destination, because the process is just as important. So the commonsensical masculine approach is to, okay, let's get to the ultimate destination as quickly, as efficiently as possible. Whereas the feminine, at first sight, can seem very flowy and unstructured. It also appears to be less logical. There may not be an immediate clear step 1, 2, 3, 4. And that is because it is very much intuitively led and guided. It comes not so much from the logical, rational mind, which is very masculine in nature. It comes more from a presencing of our heart and our womb intelligence. So this is where you can really see the connection to the feminine. The feminine is also mysterious. And so this is where it can be a struggle, right? Feminine intelligence, what does it mean? It's hard, again, to articulate and put it into words, especially when we haven't been taught the language and we haven't been taught to access these wisdom centers inside of us. So the key here, again, is not to take out the rational mind, but it's to align. It's to make sure that there is a congruence and alignment by building clarity, structure in these feminine centers, and then aligning that with our rational mind so that we can plan, we can strategize, we can take action. But it comes not just from the neck up. It comes from a feminine-centered space. So let me explain what I mean. So for instance, we may set a target and perhaps it's a deadline, and there can be this notion that we have to adhere to it. Now, when we surrender to the feminine, we are often shown a different path. And it's akin to a river flowing rather than trying to carve a straight canal or a dam, which is what you see, right? And that's artificial. It is unnatural. And so this is what I mean when I say that there's an imbalance, it's unhealthy, because we are not following the innate rhythms of nature. It's almost like we are forcibly cutting through the rocks that are there instead of honoring the curves and the bends that are there, which is the feminine way. So because it can be hard to see and take action, this is where I honestly feel that receiving support in the form of having a guide or a space holder can be tremendously useful. And I say this because a lot of the time with the women I meet, a question that I get very often is, how can I trust? How can I lean in more in my feminine? How do I even know that it's feminine, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And I would say, especially if you have been conditioned the whole of your life to operate in your masculine, leaning into your feminine, it can oftentimes feel awkward and clumsy, sort of trying to use a pair of chopsticks with your left hand if your right hand has been the dominant way you've been holding cutlery. So it's important to, first of all, to be in a space where you can have that feminine living modeled for you. And this is actually how we learn. As children, we learn not so much from what a teacher or an adult figure tells us. We learn by observing their behavior, the actions they take. And the irony oftentimes is that we have an adult figure telling us, don't do that. And we turn around and we see them doing exactly the same thing that they've told us not to do. So it's not so much head intellectual knowledge, but it's about finding the right space, the right container where you can learn. The feminine is relational. So the idea that as human beings, we co-regulate. So I know that when I hold space for my clients, I hold it from that sacred feminine space where even though they can't see it, a lot of the time they can sense it. They feel different when they enter. So I think everyone has had this experience where you enter into a room and because of the energy that's there, something shifts. So having a feminine container where you can practice until you slowly gain mastery. So that would be one piece of advice I would offer to the audience who's watching this and is curious about how they can lean more into their feminine. During this summit, there are 33 other speakers who will be sharing their experience. So this is where, over the course of 5 days, or if you've purchased lifetime access, you have this for life, you can keep coming back to the teachings that are here and use that to fill your cup, to learn, to apply, to practice. And then, that beautiful spiral that is the feminine, you spiral deeper and deeper into the feminine way until it feels completely natural and normal. And when you look back, it's going to be, I know for me, it was as if I lived in a different world prior to learning how to live the aligned woman's way.
I love that. And, I really find it beautiful that you are just giving a very concrete example, because what you were doing, I don't know if this was conscious or unconscious, but you were cross-referencing to these other speakers, which is the relational of the feminine. So that is an embodied way of how that expresses. I love it. And let me just tune into a little bit. Maybe we can take a breath together, because I feel that there was a lot to digest. I just want to honor everything that's been spoken so that we can take a moment to just settle that into ourselves before we move on. Thank you. So in the beginning, when you started, you spoke a little bit about challenges, and you were referencing explicitly to when women are in burnout. Can you speak into what do we do when we are in such a situation where there is, overflow, mind scatter, and we don't have the clarity to see and envision future possibilities? Where do we start?
Great question. And also just to say that I loved that you listened, you attuned to your innate feminine intelligence and realized that a pause was needed. That is that is again something that is so counterintuitive to the toxic patriarchal system that we're living in, where it's go, go, go all the time. That once you hit a target, it's like, okay, what's next? What's next?
Next.
Go stop and rest. And it's really interesting because, like we were both sharing prior to the recording of this call, that the cosmic energies, the astrological weather is pointing to this, that we are living in increasingly accelerated times. There is so much going on, and it's not going to stop, which means that we can either allow external circumstances, the heightened noise, the constant bombardment and distractions that are out there to shake us and to overwhelm us. Or we can, in choosing to be the co-creator of our life and coming back into our power, choose a different path to say, oh, I need a break. And even if all the judgments and all the fears come up, oh, I shouldn't be stopping. There's that fear of missing out if I don't continue. By practicing and coming back, always coming back to center, I think you will find, as we both have, that the pause, the rest, and the reflection are so key. And that ties in beautifully to the question that you posed for me. So burnout and overwhelm. It's interesting because I can think of a recent coaching call that I had with a new client who is facing that. So she's in the midst of a painful, protracted divorce. She's a single mom. She has 2 kids, one of whom is special needs. So that takes up most of her time. She can't even put in regular sleep hours because her child has special needs. So to add to that, she is trying to figure out her career, like her path, but she's feeling very powerless. Financially, it's a stretch for her and she's struggling, but she signed up. And that to me was an indication that even though she didn't feel she had the resources, she was resourceful enough to find a way. So given all of that, her main issue was that she didn't believe that she can have it all. And that's a real struggle that a lot of women who are in burnout face. The reason they're in burnout in the first place is because they're trying to do it all. They believe that they should be able to do it all. And then when they feel fatigued and depleted, they lose confidence. So in the preliminary work that we did prior to the first call, this particular client was really struggling with even envisioning, right? What's the ideal outcome at the end of our time together? At the basic level, she just wants to be able to sleep well, to get a good night's rest so that she can function. So on the first call that we had, and I always meet my client where they're at. So whereas the masculine might be tempted to just jump right in, decide on the goals and start figuring out how to take action. And that is what a lot of masculine-based coaching does. But in the feminine, it's not about pushing, it's not about doing, it's about flowing. So by the end of our first call, she felt much more empowered. She could feel into her desired future, where she wanted to be. And she also had clear action steps to take, which made her feel energized instead of overwhelmed and depleted. Again, oftentimes when we only focus on the list of what needs to be done, it can really draw us down and deplete our energy. However, when you learn to resource yourself by getting the support that you need and figuring out what is it that will light you up, etc., this is where you start to feel empowered, where you start to be inspired, where you start to naturally just find yourself pulled to taking action, to doing inspired steps that will get you to where you desire to be. So that piece is really important, where you essentially have to explore ways in which you can resource yourself so that you're not doing things from a place of burnout, where you're not doing things and pushing, forcing yourself. So let's talk about goal setting, because that's usually the first step that I take my clients through. So when the coaching journey begins, how we go about doing this in setting goals, right? It tends to be fairly masculine. I think you're probably, and the audience is as well, familiar with Smart goal setting, having clear deliverables. And I do apply that. We do look at clear specific outcomes and also a tangible timeline. And then the masculine way is just about, okay, let's zoom in, let's focus, let's get there through very concrete action steps. The masculine usually also just focuses on one thing at a time, because the masculine is not very good at multitasking. Again, it's a cliche, but it's a cliche that has some truth in it, where the feminine can handle and hold more. So because of that, the goal setting, so for instance, clients come to me perhaps because they want to work on their business, and that's all they're focused on. But in the aligned woman's way, I will take into consideration what they share, but also be mindful that a lot of it does come from the mind. So in the aligned woman's way, we do things differently. We weave in both the masculine structures, and then we also ensure that the vision that they have is held in a sacred feminine container. So from the get-go, what I find is that a lot of women, when they come to me with their goals, they're actually limiting themselves. They don't dare to dream big. So the goals that they bring to the table are safe and small. And it appears realistic on the surface, but it doesn't actually excite or move them on a deep soul level. So I help them to first unpack and deconstruct first. And that may seem counterintuitive. Sometimes they'll come and they say, oh, I want to do this, help me get there. I'm running out of time, right? So to take a step back and say, okay, let's unpack. There's usually a dismantling that needs to happen first when it comes to the feminine womb. So a shedding of preconceived ideas about what their goal ought to be. And I call this the creative destruction process. Again, biologically, as women, we are womb carriers and have the ability to give life. We also have simultaneously the ability to destroy. So the idea of creative destruction is a very feminine principle that I bring into the goal setting process. And what I find is that there is a new clarity that emerges, which often feels much fresher. It genuinely excites my client. It no longer feels like another to-do that I have to do because it's expected of me. So goal setting. And then once we have that, a magnetic, genuinely exciting goal, then it's about applying feminine principles of attaining these desired outcomes. So again, in the masculine, there's a lot of pushing forward momentum, a lot of going out to take action. But the feminine is different. It's about receptivity. So we actually do a lot of work around creating a vessel or a container to magnetize, to draw in, and then when it arrives, to be able to hold whatever it is that lands. So there are all kinds of practices that we do to get clear, and then we create the right environment. Again, when it comes to feminine, and if I can use the womb as an analogy, you've got to create the right environment for the egg and the sperm to come together to then land, anchor itself in the womb, and then grow. So the environment, creating a container, a vessel. So what I find is that oftentimes, if say a client comes to me wanting to work on her business, the problem is it's near impossible to address only one aspect of your life in isolation. As human beings, we are complex creatures. So what I do in my coaching is that I go down and examine the common root cause. And there is this feminine wisdom that emerges, that unfolds. And this idea of emerging and unfolding is very much against the toxic masculine paradigm of you can't sit still. You need to be doing something. Otherwise, you're a failure. The beautiful thing about the feminine is that it can hold multiple issues. It can hold complexity. Just think of a mother who is able to juggle many different tasks at once. Men generally find it harder to do. It has something to do with the biological wiring of the mind, but energetically, there is also a difference. So the feminine, I find, tends to be a lot more inclusive and holistic. And I strongly believe that the problems that we see in the world today, it has to do with how fragmented we have been approaching life. where there's a tendency to compartmentalize things. So even for myself, when my professional life was growing great, I found that my personal life, my marriage was falling apart. And I would see this division and a separation. So I find that when it comes to the aligned woman's way, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just about trying to look at one area. It's about finding alignment in everything. And again, as you know, Julia, we live in a fractal holographic world where everything is interconnected and interdependent, which means that when we experience a change, an upgrade in an aspect of our life, everything else changes. So it may be that a client comes to me wanting to work on her career and is facing challenges in her home life. When that comes out in our coaching, we pivot, and I hold a container to look at that. And when we are able to shift to make a transformation of some kind, and she experiences that, to them, to my clients, it often seems very magical. They tell me, I have no idea that by looking at this other aspect, now my business is growing. And the obstacles just seem to have melted away. It seems like a miracle only because we haven't fully understood how feminine principles really work. So the idea that everything is interconnected and that there needs to be an emerging and an unfolding. You cannot force the process. You cannot push it. Again, using the womb analogy, you can't force and make something happen. You have to allow it to emerge. And the feminine, it is about being in a state where you are thereby able to respond. And the response is not planned. It's not strategic. It's very much in the present moment. So it's spontaneous, but it's also wise and skillful. That goes against the masculine way of operating, which I know far too well. Having a plan, having a strategy in place, a structured 1, 2, 3, 4 step to attain the goal. But I find that life is messy, and that's the way it's meant to be. It's natural, it's organic. How can we learn how to flow with it instead of trying to ram our heads and butt our way through the barriers and the obstacles? So I think that gives you an idea of how the aligned woman's way, we do use masculine structures, but at the end of the day, it's about finding a right balance between both feminine and masculine. So for each individual client that I work with, there is what I call a Goldilocks formula, where each client discovers for themselves what is the key that enables them to live their lives without burnout, without the overwhelm, while still attaining their desired results. I hope I've answered your question.
You did. And, the picture that I'm getting is this like geometrical shape that on the one hand side, it looks like a square, and that's kind of like the masculine structure for it. And in it, there's like total chaos, and there's this spiral swirling. And so it's only when the two come together that the alchemy of creation is actually happening. So that was, a beautiful explanation from you. And I feel that there is so much beyond your words that is spreading to everybody who is listening and watching. I feel that was kind of like a transmission in itself, just by, listening and letting your words permeate the being. So that was very deep. Thank you. So before we come to a close, is there any final thoughts or messages you would like to share with the viewers of your summit?
Once again, thank you for that beautiful reflection. I was just sitting in the silence, basking and receiving. In fact, that's another key that a lot of women have had to relearn to be able to receive. So much of the time we push compliments away. We feel, again, that comes from a lack, a sense of lack, a belief that they're not good enough. One of the things that I would like to highlight, because last year's summit was about unlocking the wisdom and secrets of feminine energetics. So I didn't go very much into the masculine, but as I've reiterated again and again, it's not about pushing the masculine away. In fact, it's necessary to have the masculine in order to operate successfully. And what we don't want is to live in a toxic, unhealthy masculine way. So anytime you feel that you're pushing against your will, or that you have to motivate yourself in order to get something done, that's already a signal. It may not seem like much, but it's a signal, if you know how to listen, that it's not healthy. So the remedy is to cultivate more of your feminine intelligence. And that's what this summit is all about. So the way I see it, when we are living the aligned woman's way, we get to be in a flow state where there's a deep engagement with what is arising. There is a deep participation. We are not just living life by analyzing and deliberating from the mind, but there is a spontaneous, full-bodied responsiveness because we are embodying. So I guess the final point I'd like to make is that for myself personally, and with the women that I've worked with, I have witnessed time and again that it's entirely possible when you make the internal shift to arrive at the ultimate destination that you desire. What has been holding women back for so long are the distorted patriarchal narratives that seem to get us to believe that we are not as good as, because it's the masculine that has been prioritized. So what I do is I support the women that I work with to access and connect back to their innate feminine intelligence. As I mentioned, when they're sitting in that energetic space, they continually reflect back to me that it feels like magic, it's a miracle. But really what they are discovering is what ancient technologies, what ancient priestesses have always known, that there is a beautiful wisdom that is the feminine. Once you get in touch with that, you'll gain more confidence. And then they're good to go on their own, right? They start having faith in themselves. They know that they have power. They're no longer dependent on listening to an external source. So what I treasure most of all, and what I hope that this summit will create, is a resonant field. When you immerse yourself in these conversations, there is a relationship that develops and builds. And in this field, there can be a healing of the fragmentation of your feminine intelligence. This is where you can melt boundaries. You can start connecting back with yourself. So what I'd like to share is to encourage the women who are watching this to just enjoy, to receive and take in as much as they can, given whatever schedule that they may be on. My hope is that they receive the nourishment that they need so that they can resource themselves and live life the aligned woman's way.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for showing us and the participants how to embrace the awe in us. I want to ask you one more question, because I know that all of the speakers are having a free gift. And I mean, for you, it's like you as the host of the summit, putting all of this immense work, dedication, devotion, and service together with this great intention that you're holding, which is an amazing gift in itself. And I know that you also wanted to speak a little bit into the lifetime access. So is there any piece that you would want to mention?
Yeah, thank you for asking me that. So yeah, first and foremost, this is my free gift. I spent 6 to 9 months creating the summit because I want to put this information out there.
Wow.
I want the women to realize that there's a kinder way of doing things to navigate the world in a more easeful way. So as a former school teacher, this is the education that I feel is sorely needed in our world today. And the more women that can awaken to and empower themselves with this knowledge, that's what's going to make a difference. And then on top of that, if you're watching this and you realize that, hey, this is something that I want, that it's helpful, if you purchase lifetime access, all attendees who purchase lifetime access, they'll get to receive up to 3 months worth of implementation support. So this was something that I didn't have last year. It was really just putting up.
That's amazing.
Putting out the information. But I realized, like, from the feedback that I was receiving from last year's attendees, that they also wanted guided support in community, and also just more support in helping them to put these teachings into practice. And because I primarily work one-on-one, which means I've limited capacity, I can only see this number of clients at one point, I decided to collaborate with some of the speakers. There are live workshops. Some of them are also offering generous memberships. Like, these are paid offerings that they usually only offer with a subscription, but they are offering attendees who purchase lifetime access the opportunity to have a taste, to access them. And then there are both recorded and live workshops that will help them to take further action steps. So what this means is that there are over like $1,000 worth of bonuses for them to have continued engagement, participation, and support. And that's what's really going to make a difference, right? Because we can receive all the knowledge and information, but until we apply them to our lives, we're not going to see the tangible results that we know is possible. So yeah, I just like to put it out there. I've done my best to keep the pricing exactly the same as I have last year, even though I've added $1,000 over worth of bonuses. So my hope is that the women out there who need this support can be able to find it in an accessible way. Yeah.
Wow, that is truly amazing. And I feel that I haven't come across any summit who is like doing that, and particularly this support of integration. So this is truly amazing. It was such an honor and a pleasure to speak with you as the host of this amazing summit that you've put together. And I'm wishing you and all the other speakers all the best. And of course, all the participants and people who are watching and listening to this, so many insights, so much inspiration and takeaways to integrate into your own being and into your own life. Thank you, Irene.
And thank you so much, Julia, for the amazing work that you're doing, and also for holding space for me as the interviewer today. So thank you, everyone, for watching this summit. Stay tuned and keep a lookout for a whole range of other amazing interviews to fill your cup and support you in living your best life.